Welcome to our deep dive. We're going on a wild ride through the world of debt and money.
Yeah, get ready for some seriously surprising stuff about how these ideas shaped history.
And even our sense of right and wrong.
Exactly.
Our guide to this time is David Graeber's Debt, the first 5,000 years.
This deep dive will completely change how you see money and economics.
Alrighty.
We're going to bust some myths and hopefully give you some aha moments
Okay, bring on the ahas.
about how money and debt shape societies for thousands of years.
Okay, so most of us picture early humans doing a lot of bartering, right?
Right.
Like trading a chicken for a basket or whatever.
That's how we got to money, right?
Yeah.
Well, Graeber says that's totally a myth.
Oh.
It turns out bartering was actually way more common in modern times.
Really?
Like, think about Russia in the 90s.
Okay.
Or Argentina's financial crisis back in 2002.
When their money was basically worthless.
Exactly. When currencies crashed, people went back to bartering.
So bartering, this thing we associate with, like, primitive societies, actually pops up when our modern systems break down.
Right.
That's kind of mind-blowing.
It makes you wonder, if bartering didn't lead to money,
Yeah.
where did money come from?
Right. Good question.
There are two big theories, and people are still arguing about them today.
Juicy.
One is primordial debt.
Okay.
Imagine ancient Mesopotamia.
Got it.
People brought offerings to temples, like grain or animals.
Like sacrifices to the gods?
Kinda. But those offerings could also be seen as early payments,
Ooh, interesting.
maybe even like taxes or tributes.
So those offerings became standardized
Right.
and eventually turned into a system of money.
Exactly.
Wow.
Then there's the credit theory,
Okay.
which is the opposite.
Opposite how?
It says money came from systems of credit, like IOUs between people. Think of medieval England.
Okay.
They use these things called tally sticks.
Tally sticks.
Yeah, literally pieces of wood with notches to represent debts.
Oh, like a physical IOU.
Exactly.
So instead of starting with physical stuff, like grain,
Right.
money started with this abstract idea,
Yeah,
a promise to pay later.
you got it.
Money's already looking different.
And these two theories have huge implications for today.
How so?
Is our economy based on the actual value of things?
Or on trust and credit?
It's a fundamental question about how we organize the world.
Okay, so whether temples or IOUs, eventually money becomes more concrete.
Right.
Coins.
And Graeber points to a key period, the Axial Age.
Between 800 BC and 600 AD,
You know,
when all those new philosophical and religious ideas were popping up,
that's right, Buddha, Zoroaster, Confucius.
it was a real turning point.
And that's when coinage appears all over.
Like where?
Lydia, Greece, Persia, India, China.
And it wasn't a coincidence, right?
Yep.
Coinage is portable,
Mm-hmm.
easy to divide, perfect for financing, wars.
You got it.
And didn't armies, coins, and even slavery kind of rise up together back then?
You're catching on quick.
It's a little dark, isn't it? Coinage makes it easier to pay armies.
Armies conquer territory,
And often get more slaves in the process.
fueling those expanding economies.
It's like a vicious cycle, even back then.
A dark side of globalization.
Speaking of the ancients,
Yeah,
the Greeks and their coins,
they weren't just thinking about them as money.
what else were they thinking?
They saw coins as both physical things and abstractions.
Like, what?
Like they're philosophical ideas, you know?
Okay, now I'm hooked.
We've gone from bartering myths to empires and coins.
What happens next?
Next, we head to the Middle Ages. Knights, monks, and early corporations.
And I bet there are more moral dilemmas about money.
You bet.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
This is where the Catholic Church gets really involved.
Okay.
They're grappling with usury,
Which is...
lending money at interest.
Right.
And their position on it keeps changing over time.
Really?
Had a big impact on Western economic thought.
Got it.
But here's the surprise.
What's that?
Those medieval corporations were nothing like businesses today.
Wait, seriously?
Seriously.
So they weren't all about profits and competition.
Nope, more like guilds or religious groups.
What were they focused on?
Things like mutual aid and spiritual goals.
It really shows how our ideas about economics are shaped by history.
Exactly. Our system isn't some eternal truth,
It's just one way of doing things.
and there have been many others.
I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
That's one of Graeber's main points.
It's not just history.
He's making us rethink how economies even work.
Well, I'm ready to dive deeper into those medieval times.
Let's do it.
Okay, so last time we were about to step into medieval Europe,
Right.
a world of knights and monks,
Mm-hmm.
and all those moral debates about money.
Lots of debate.
You mentioned the Catholic Church was really wrestling with usury.
Yeah.
So did they just, like, completely condemn lending at interest?
Well, it wasn't that simple.
It never is it?
The church's stance on usury actually changed over time.
So at first they were pretty strict.
Yeah, they saw it as a sin, profiting from someone's troubles.
Makes sense.
But as trade grew and cities got bigger,
They had to adapt.
they kind of had to reconcile their beliefs with the changing economy.
So there were some loopholes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's like creative interpretations of the Bible.
Absolutely. They were way more lenient with loans between merchants.
And low loans to the poor.
Exactly.
And some monasteries got pretty good at, well, profiting from lending.
Without technically charging interest.
Clever monks. It sounds like this whole usury debate really shaped how people saw money.
Oh, it did.
And morality, too.
For centuries. Graeber even argues that it created two separate moral universes.
Two.
One based on trust and credit.
And the other.
On those impersonal contracts. With interest.
So these two universes were kind of clashing.
Often in tension, yeah.
I need an example. How did this actually play out?
Graeber talks about England in the 1500s and 1600s.
Okay.
Everyday life was mostly based on credit, not cash. You got your bread from the baker, your beer from the brewer.
But you didn't pay right away.
Nope, you'd settle up later, maybe at the end of the week, month, even the year.
It was like a whole network of IOUs.
And favors.
How did anyone keep track?
It was all built on relationships and trust.
So different from how we do things now.
Totally different. And here's the funny part.
What?
Graeber uses Adam Smith.
The invisible hand guy.
The one and only. You know that famous quote about the butcher, brewer, and baker?
Acting in their own self-interest.
Yeah. Graeber says Smith was describing an ideal, not reality.
So in Smith's own time...
daily life still relied heavily on credit.
Wow, he was projecting his vision onto the past.
Interesting, right?
But this credit-based world eventually breaks down, doesn't it?
It does.
And colonialism plays a big role.
It's a turning point, for sure.
All those ships coming back from the Americas loaded with silver.
It totally changed European economies.
And not just the physical silver.
Right. New systems of credit and finance emerge.
To manage all that wealth.
And they're all tied to those overseas empires.
So colonialism kind of sped up the shift.
From a world of credit to a world of interest.
Okay, we've got silver pouring in, new financial systems, European power on the rise.
It's a lot happening.
And this is all happening alongside the Reformation.
Oh, yeah.
So things are about to get even crazier.
You said it. Reformation, religious turmoil, political upheaval.
And money is right at the center of it all.
Right at the heart of it.
Even Martin Luther had something to say about money.
He sure did. Initially, he was against usury.
Saw it as exploitation.
Yeah, exactly.
But then his stance softened.
Well, as the Reformation gained momentum.
Yeah.
Luther's facing opposition from all sides.
He kind of had to compromise.
He ended up siding with those who said moderate interest was okay.
Between merchants, especially.
It's like he had to balance his ideals with reality.
It wasn't just theological debates, though.
Oh, no, not at all.
There was social unrest, too.
Big time. Peasants and workers revolting.
Against the landlords.
And the rulers, demanding economic justice.
And money was a big part of it.
Absolutely. People were struggling under debt, while the elite were getting richer.
Usury became a symbol of injustice.
Exactly.
It's like they were tapping into older ideas about debt and forgiveness.
You know, like the Jubilee from the Old Testament?
Right. This is fascinating.
It's a real clash of ideas about money and morality.
Sometimes in really explosive ways.
No kidding.
This is getting intense. We've covered so much.
We have.
From those ancient bartering myths to colonial plunder to the Reformation.
And we're not done yet.
Things are about to get even more complex as we move into the modern era.
You're telling me.
I have a feeling it's going to be a wild ride.
Buckle up. The story of money and debt. It's far from over.
We still need to see how capitalism came out of all this.
And how those tensions between credit and interest, they're still shaping our world today.
Okay, I'm ready for the next chapter. Let's talk about modern capitalism. We've gone from ancient bartering myths to the Protestant Reformation.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride.
Now it's time to see how modern capitalism emerged.
Out of this whole crazy past.
I'm ready to see how it all comes together.
This is when you see those European powers going global.
Right, building those huge empires.
Through colonialism and trade.
Think of those early merchants setting sail.
Those corporations, like the East India Company.
Fortunes made and lost.
It's like the beginning of global finance, high stakes.
All that new wealth must have changed how people thought about money.
It did, but those older ideas about debt, and morality, they didn't just vanish.
They stuck
They were
around.
transformed, yeah.
Like, give me an example.
Take usury.
Okay.
That debate didn't go away, it just changed shape.
So how did those moral concerns play out in this new world?
You see different approaches popping up.
Like what?
In Europe, there's this growing focus on individual responsibility
Okay.
and the idea that contracts are sacred
It's like less about the community's view of debt.
and more about those individual obligations,
Right.
legal agreements.
This makes sense.
It fits with those ideas about natural rights.
That were becoming popular back then.
Exactly.
So this new framework, it kind of justified things like private property.
And enforcing debts, even if it hurt the debtor.
There were critics, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Thinkers like Rousseau.
Okay.
He questioned private property, warned about inequality,
But the individualistic view, it kind of won out.
especially as capitalism took root.
It must changed how people actually experience debt.
For sure.
It led to wage labor.
Yeah, people are seen as free agents now.
Selling their labor.
But that also meant they were on the hook for their own debts.
With less of a safety net.
It's a trade-off, right?
More freedom,
More opportunity.
but also more risk.
And the potential for real hardship.
It's a double-edged sword.
Exactly.
And this wasn't just happening in Europe.
Nope. Global capitalism was affecting the whole world,
Often in pretty bad ways.
imposing new forms of debt.
And exploiting labor.
Yeah, think back to those colonial silver mines.
Right. In the Americas.
How did this new system impact them?
Yeah. What happened?
It was brutal a lot of the time.
How so?
Indigenous people forced into debt peonage
Or coerced labor.
to get those resources.
That were fueling Europe's growth.
It wasn't just about stealing existing wealth.
It was about creating these new systems.
Of debt and dependency
A really dark side of history.
that we often forget when we talk about progress.
The story of money and debt is tied up with violence and inequality.
It's woven right in.
Okay, let's jump to the 20th century.
Right.
How does Graeber connect all this to our current system
He talks about the rise of the U.S. dollar.
as the world's reserve currency?
Right, which really solidified after World War II.
For those of us who aren't economists,
Yeah.
what does reserve currency even mean?
It's the currency that other countries use
For what?
for international transactions.
Oh, okay.
Like they keep it in their central banks.
And for most of the last century,
If you wanted to be part of the global market,
you needed dollars?
that gave the U.S. a ton of power,
They could just print money.
and everyone else had to accept it.
Wow.
They could also run big trade deficits
Because
other countries needed those dollars.
to buy stuff like oil.
The world became dependent on the dollar.
And this is part of what caused the 2008 crisis.
According to Graeber, yeah.
How so?
He sees it as the culmination of all that tension.
Between debtors and creditors.
Those with access to credit and those without.
It was all fueled by deregulation.
And this belief that housing prices would never go down.
So we ended up with a mountain of debt.
And when the housing bubble burst,
Everything came crashing down.
what's crazy is how governments responded.
What did they do?
They bailed out the banks.
So the losses were spread out to everyone.
while regular people felt most of the pain
It's like privatizing profit.
and socializing losses.
Yeah.
This is where Graeber's critique gets really sharp.
What does he say?
He says the 2008 crisis exposed the flaws in our system.
A system based on what?
Endless growth,
Okay.
accumulating debt.
And concentrating wealth in the hands of a few.
It's unsustainable.
So what do we do? Does Graeber have any answers?
He doesn't give us a step-by-step plan.
But he wants us to rethink things.
From the ground up. Debt, money, our relationship to the planet.
We need to move beyond just growth.
and create something more just and sustainable.
That's a big challenge.
It is. But after this deep dive,
I see why he's pushing us to think bigger.
our economic system isn't some fixed law.
It's something we created.
And if we created it,
We can change it.
that's the key. This book isn't just history.
It's a call to action.
Question your assumptions. Challenge the status quo.
Imagine something better.
A more just and equitable future.
What a journey this has been. Thank you for being our expert guide.
It's been my pleasure.
We've explored so much. Debt, money, morality, history.
It's all connected.
And to everyone listening, keep diving deep. Keep questioning.
Keep imagining.
Until next time.